Welcome to Archaeologists Anonymous, your source for your quick archaeological fix. I'm your host, Silvia, and today's topic is the hairdos and don'ts of ancient Rome. So firstly, I'd like to ask the question, why do we care so much about hair? Almost everyone watching this video probably spent at least some time doing something to their hair. Even if you stuck with bedhead, that itself is a decision about how your hair should look. Our hair sends all sorts of messages. For example, short hair might suggest you are sort of a practical person. Spiked mohawk might suggest you're a punk. Even this hair is sending a message. Hair is so important because it is so malleable. You can do a lot to it. Hair also frames the most expressive part of the body, the face. So it's in our control and it's right next to our main social organs. So hair is in the exact right position to be a social communicator. Just like today, ancient Roman hair thousands of years ago also sent social messages. So, if you were a woman in ancient Rome, you would have to keep the following things in mind when you do your hair. First of all, how did they do their hair? Would you have, hairpins, hair ties, scrunchies like we have today? Well, it turns out that even though they didn't have scrunchies, they did have hairpins and ties that you could, make a hairdo with. And you could get some quite elaborate hairstyles like that. That's pretty crazy. A real hairstylist actually looked at these haircuts to figure out how they did it, and it turns out the most likely way was that they sewed their hair up to be like that. This crazy hair is what we call the Flavian hairstyle. We also think that part of that might have been a wig. We've actually found wigs in the burials of Roman women. So okay, let's take a look at another Flavian hairstyle. How would you know to do that particular hairstyle? Because it was actually kind of a craze throughout the empire during the Flavian dynasty. Well, you might have gotten it from this public bust. So, you're walking through the streets of Rome and you see that bust of Titus's daughter Julia and you go, you know what, I should do that. That's the fashion these days. A lot of aristocratic women copied whatever the royal family was doing, basically. You also might have been able to find out what the Roman family was doing based on the coins. So that's a coin of Titus's daughter Julia. You probably would have gotten hairstyles more from coins than from busts because, you're using coins every day. It's not every day that you walk by the bust, right? But before you go rushing to get your needles and wigs and all that to make the Flavian hairstyle happen, you have to consider one important thing, which is your class. If you are a rich woman, you could afford to have servants do you up like that, and you could afford to take the time out of your day to, sit still while they sew that hairstyle together. However, if you were a poor woman, you couldn't afford the servants, you couldn't afford the time, you'd be kind of out of luck, and most women in Rome were not rich. So this is a good example of how hair can actually send messages about your social class. Basically, the Flavian hairstyle is nice if you can get it. Another consideration you'd have to make besides, class and where you find new hairstyles would be whether you cover your hair. One of the classic garments of the Roman matron is the palla, which was a hood that they would wear over their hair. That's a statue of Emperor Augustus's wife Livia wearing a palla. The palla was a symbol of sort of matronly virtue, traditional Roman family values, that sort of thing. The palla was also a pretty impractical garment. It went with the stola, which was sort of the female equivalent of the toga, which was also impractical. So these garments basically said, I don't need to work for a living, I can wear these impractical garments and be fine. So this was another instance of class signaling. Interestingly, even though it does sort of indicate virtue and class, a lot of women just stopped wearing it as time progressed because it was so impractical. So after the turn of the millennia, even if you were rich, you wouldn't necessarily wear a palla. You'd wear one if you wanted to especially signal your sort of conservative societal and political outlook, basically. So now that we've covered sort of some styles, some covering, let's talk about hair length. If you cut your hair short, you'd be looked upon as a bit strange. You'd definitely be deviating from the norm. Women were expected to have long hair and men were expected to have short hair. So basically, if you wanted to blend in, you'd probably have long hair. If you wanted to stand out and maybe be chastised for your breach of moral code, then you'd go with the short hair. Okay, so if you go with the long hair, do you put it up or down? they sent different messages. Most women had their hair up in some kind of braid or curl or something like that. This is all women, including the lower class. To let your hair down loose would indicate that you are sort of a grieving widow or are mourning for maybe the loss of a son. So if you went around ancient Rome wearing your hair down and long, don't be surprised if someone offered their condolences. Alright, finally, let's talk about adornment. What could you spangle your hair with in ancient Rome? Well, for an example, let's look at this really sassy fresco from Pompeii. You could put a lot of different things in your hair, including, pearls, leaves, a gold hairnet like this, different sorts of colored bands. You could even dye your hair. Although if you dyed your hair, some Romans would judge you. Speaking of judging, if you adorned your hair like that, a lot of men might look upon you as, vain or spending too much time dressing your hair or spending too much money, which are sort of traditional misogynistic critiques still thrown at women today. So, men judging women for their cosmetic decisions is thousands of years old. Alright, that is the end of our brief look into the wondrous world of women's hair in ancient Rome. Thank you for watching. Please check out another video, like and subscribe, and dig on. I've been Sean Silvia for Archaeologists Anonymous.
I'm gonna learn how Romans did their hair. I'm gonna learn how Romans did their hair. I'm gonna learn how Romans did their hair and send off social cues.